Okay, so at this point we've seen how to use the log, the UE log, and we've also seen the FTransform. Now as an exercise, I'd like you to go and look at the documentation or some of the helpers for the constructors that you have with the FTransform. And so then I'd like you to go and declare an FTransform and initialize it. So not just the location as we have done it previously, but all of the variables. You have an overload where you can pass it the location, rotation, and the scale. Okay, so go through, read the documentation if you need to, or look at the overloads in Visual Studio itself. We've looked at how to declare and initialize a struct in a previous video as well. Okay, so you might want to go and look at that if you don't quite remember. Then I'd like you to use, as we've done before with the toString, where we had that heat information, I'd like you to now go and declare that FTransform variable and then use that, so .toString, to print out to the log. So basically there should just be 2 extra lines that you add in maybe a begin play function. So in your level script actor or even in your chair actor, it doesn't really matter, or in your game mode. So when the game starts, you want that information to print out to the console. So what the rotation, location, and scale is, that is contained within that transform struct. If you have a problem, don't worry about it too much, just come and watch the rest of the video and you'll see it's not that difficult. So I'm in the documentation for FTransform. The documentation is our friend. From this you can see this is a struct, the variables that it contains, and then you have the constructors. If you take a look at the constructor here, you can see I have an FTransform that takes in an FRotator, an FVector for the translation, and an FVector for scale. Also, if you take a look at the functions, you'll see down here you have toString. Now unfortunately, as is often the case with this documentation, this is not all that detailed. It's not explained all that well. So if you go to this, for example, it doesn't really show us exactly the formatting or like what it is going to put out, right? You can see this returns an F string and so on, but we don't get much more than that. But still, at least we can see the constructors that we have available. Again, let's say IntelliSense doesn't work, because sometimes it, especially if you have an older like a hard disk drive instead of an SSD, it kind of takes some time to catch up, right? And then we can also see, okay, we have a toString function. Again, for the most part, you can get this from the helpers, but I'll link you to the documentation anyway. Previously, we've seen that I kept the test level script actor, this begin play function, and so that is where I have this code. You can actually do this maybe in the chair as well or in the game mode, but I'm just demonstrating it somewhere else. Of course, if you go and run this, you always want to make sure that your level blueprints still inherit from this class. So I simply declare an FTransform called DemoTransform, and here I am initializing it as well. You have a few overloads, Control-Shift spacebar. If I go to 11 here, it takes in an FRotator for rotation, an FVector for translation, or in other words its position, and then also an FVector for scale 3D. Of course you can go and declare and initialize those separately and then just pass those into here, but instead of doing that, I just go and construct them right here. So this FRotator, you see I have 90 degrees right here, and then this FVector with this overload, you can see constructor initializes all components to a single float value. So X, Y, Z in that case will all have 50 here with that constructor. And I do a similar thing here. I set the scale to 111 uniformly. With the UE log, again I do log temp warning, and then I do the text macro transform PRS here just for position, rotation, and scale. %S for that F string. I do the dereferencing basically again with that asterisk, and then I do demo transform. So the FTransform also has this toString, which will print it out in a nice format as we'll see here shortly. So that's basically it. Just those 2 lines, fairly straightforward. Again, as I mentioned, if you want to have some ability to set that maybe in the details panel or something like that, you might want to go and declare these as U properties maybe, and then like initialize them maybe in the constructor and pass them in here if you want. I just did it in this way, just as a quick demonstration. Back in Unreal Engine, if I click play now, I have the output log, you can see we get that warning. I have this filter down and everything. Transform, position, rotation, and scale. You have 50, 50, 50, 0, 89.999, and so on, and the scale. Okay, this works fine. Now, something I could have mentioned previously was if you go to Edit, Editor Preferences, and under Appearance, if you scroll down to the Output Log, the section down here, you have an option to change the log font size. Now at 9 it might be very small. My eyes again are not what they used to be. So you can change this maybe to something like 12 or something like that. And I'm going to change it here because for the recordings this might then also be easier to see on your end. I'll just go and restart that. Click play and you can see this is much bigger. You can set it to whatever you like, of course. I'm just going to keep it to 12 in this case. And now we can actually see these are periods, these are commas. It's much easier to see those now. You have the vertical bar in here to separate these out. So the position, rotation, and scale information. So again, I wrote this part, but this comes from that toString function. You can see this is what I wrote out, and then the rest comes from this toString function. So what this means is once we have that variable declared and initialized, we can get the location, we can get the rotation, the scale 3D, and so on. And as we've seen previously, you can also set the location, set the rotation, and so forth. So that's a quick look at the transform in a bit more detail. I just wanted to do this extra bonus video here because it might not be that obvious how to go about using this, especially as a beginner. So I hope you find this useful, and I'll see you in the next video.